What is vapour density? Well, it's the density of a gas or vapour compared to the density of hydrogen. That's what you need to remember. It's vapour density is compared to hydrogen. Why do they compare it to hydrogen? Because hydrogen is the lightest element. It's the lightest element in the periodic table. And the vapour density is determined by using the molecular weight of the atoms concerned. Now, as you can see from this periodic table here, the molecular weight of carbon is 12. The molecular weight of nitrogen is 14. Molecular weight of oxygen is 16. So, the vapour density of, say for example, methane, let's work it out. CH4. The carbon molecular weight is 12. Hydrogen is 1 and there's 4 of them. So that gives you a molecular weight of 16. Well, the molecular weight of hydrogen is 2 because there's 2 hydrogens. So that gives you 16 divided by 2. The vapour density of methane is 8. Methane is 8 times heavier than hydrogen. So that's the vapour. Now the problem is, this doesn't actually tell you a lot because air is not just made up of hydrogen. What you want to know really is, how heavy is that gas compared to air? And this is why we move on now to relative density. Now the relative density of a vapour compared to air, this is what relative density is. It's comparing it to air. Now this is important because it tells you that if it's released, is it going to go up or down? In other words, what ventilation do you need? If it's lighter than air, it's going to go up. If it's heavy, it's going to go down. What are the ventilation requirements? Now, lead-acid batteries emit hydrogen. So charging these batteries emits hydrogen. Where should you need the vent? Well, it depends. If hydrogen is the lightest element, where's it going? Up. So where do you need the ventilation? In a charging area for batteries, you need high-level ventilation. Don't let it accumulate. I went to a chemical company that processed hydrogen. And it was an outside plant, massive plant. And the guy said to me, if we get a release of hydrogen, we're really, really worried because all the ignition sources, because it's a highly flammable gas, it's hydrogen. I said, yes, but the vapour density of hydrogen is 1 because you compare it to hydrogen. In other words, if there's a leak of hydrogen gas, where's it all going? Well, up very quickly. There'll be nothing coming this way. It's all going up. What I'd be more worried about is the flight path of an aircraft. If an aircraft flew over a cloud of hydrogen gas and it got in the chamber, you're going to have an explosion. So what I'm getting is vapour density and relative density are very important. Now, one number you need to remember is the relative density, the molecular weight of air, or relative, is 28.8. That's the molecular weight of air. It is approximately 28.8. Do you think oxygen is heavier or lighter than air? What do you think? Heavier or lighter than air? Well, let's look on here then. The atomic number of oxygen is 16. The molecular weight of oxygen is 32. Well, it's heavier then, isn't it? Air is 28.8, oxygen's heavier. If you get a cylinder of oxygen, you open it up and you release it, the oxygen will go down. It will settle down because it's heavier. So again, where do you need your ventilation if you're going to try and get it low below? CO2, is it heavier or lighter than air? If I set off a CO2 cylinder in here, is it going to settle high or is it going to settle low? Well, let's look. CO2, carbon is 12. Oxygen is 16, so CO2 is 12 plus 16 plus 16, 44. CO2 is heavier than air and it will sink and it will collect down low. So CO2 is heavier. What about methane? Is methane heavier or lighter? Think of methane gas, like a sewer gas. Let's have a look. CH4, carbon is 12, hydrogen is 1, so methane is 16. It is lighter than air. So that's going to, where's that going to collect? Up high. So you need high level ventilation. One more. Is acetylene heavier or lighter than air? C2H2. Well, carbon's 12, hydrogen's 1. That makes it 22, 24, gives you 26. Acetylene is lighter than air, but only slightly. Air is 28.8. Acetylene is 26. In other words, it's going to mix very, very well. And it's a very volatile gas, is acetylene. So where should you store acetylene cylinders? Outside, in cages, well ventilated, away from buildings, away from ignition sources. I turned up to do some training at a foundry. And when I arrived at this foundry, I'll tell you what, it was like walking into hell. That's the only way I can describe it. You walk in there, there's forklifts flying around, health and safety, I'm not happy. I walk in, there's 20 CO2 extinguishers empty on a wall right next to me. And I walked in, I said, what? I said to the manager, I said, what are those for? He says, they're for all the fires we get. This is a foundry, mate. We get fires in foundries. I said, what fires will you get? He said, well, something will spit out the furnace and set fire to some rubbish. So our guys put it out with an extinguisher. Well, what does that tell you? Poor housekeeping. That was the problem. There's no housekeeping rules. Anyway, I walked in the foundry, big foundry, furnace is burning away. I looked in the corner, there's 2 acetylene cylinders being stored in the foundry. And I said to this guy, I said, hey, why are you storing acetylene in the foundry? He said, this fire guy said it was all right. Did he? Have you got his name? Oh, told you it's all right to store them in here. He said, look, they're stored upright, which I like, and they've got yellow lines painted round them. I says, all right, I never saw them. Oh, you're all right. Because if that acetylene leaks and it sees the yellow lines, what's it going to do? Oh, I shouldn't go past them, should I? What's that got to do with it? If that acetylene leaks, C2H2 leaks, that cylinder, what's it going to do? It's going to mix really well with the air. And when it travels across the foundry and it reaches the furnace, what's going to happen? An explosion. The foundry. You do not store acetylene cylinders in foundries. You might use them with hot work permits if you have to, but you store them outside the foundries.